Hello everybody, welcome to CycloneFanatic.com. Chris Williams along with Austen Arnaud, our first installment of a series we're calling Position Focus here on the website, as we're going to go position by position, break down the 2012 Iowa State Cyclones. We start today, Austin, with a position group I feel might be maybe the most underrated on Iowa State's roster heading into next season, and that is the defensive backs. Now you lose Leonard Johnson, Ter'Ran, Benton, a couple of my all-time favorite Cyclones. I love talking to those guys. A ton of swag. It's what you guys are calling it nowadays. But
not me.
Really solid football players. Leonard's going to have a pro career. But I feel like from a depth perspective, Iowa State might actually be stronger next year. I know Paul Rhodes talked about that in spring football. I guess we'll start at that cornerback position. Really, when you have a lockdown cornerback like Leonard Johnson was, we saw that versus Oklahoma State last year. It's such a weapon for you defensively.
Right.
Jansen Watson, a guy who has really turned a lot of heads on special teams the last couple of years. He looks to step into that role. How do you think he'll do?
I think he'll do just fine. I know I've said this before, but Jansen's the fastest guy on that football team, I believe. The guy can cover ground. He's for a short guy, he's got an incredible stride and he's long. I mean, if you look at the kid, he's got long arms, long legs. But he's like 5'9", which bodes well. I mean, he can get deflect those passes and he can get out and run. Jansen will fit in just fine. The thing you worry about with Jansen is his level of physicality. Is he going to be when you have Leonard? Who's an NFL guy and who can jam at the line of scrimmage and is a very physical corner. We saw so many the personal fouls and the big hits. That's what Leonard was about, and that's what you need to be a little nasty at corner. Jansen needs to fill that role and be able to be an aggressive corner and use his body the way that Leonard did to try and get guys off the line of scrimmage. As well as him, it's kind of funny because him and Jeremy are kind of the same player. Jansen and Jeremy, they're athletic, shorter guys that can make plays and are great vertical leaps. But I think Jansen will fill that role very well.
Well, and then you got to look at the depth chart here, and I see guys, Ken Lynn, Sam Richardson, Cliff Stokes, all who, I don't know, I think will see time. Yeah. I just kind of think this is going to be a cornerback by committee. I mean, Stokes at 6'1", you need some length, bring him in for a few plays. I mean, do you think that's how it's going to work?
Yeah, and it's very, I played with guys that are similar to those guys, and I'm going to use the time machine here. Alan Bell, remember him? He had a good junior year when he first got here. That really reminds me of Cliff Stokes, a tall, athletic kid who can run. And you look at Sam Richardson, he reminds me of Leonard. He's a small kid, he's kind of like a pit bull. He's big, big, strong kid. Yeah, and then you look at Kenneth Lynn, who, from what I've heard, is the best redshirted player they had last year at corner. So it looks like things are moving towards the right direction. We're making the right moves as recruiting goes and getting these players ready. So whereas hopefully these guys will be able to step in this year and play, not right away, but a year removed from high school.
Just love the depth. Matt Thomas, a guy we haven't even brought up at this point.
Matt's a good kid out of Lancaster, Texas, who knows football. And the one thing with Matt, he's light. He needs to, it's hard for him to gain weight, but he's a good player as well.
Let's go to the safety spots where I think when I talked about underrated earlier, I looked at the field steal. Jaquez Washington isn't even mentioned, in the top 4 as far as a free safety goes in the Big 12 Conference. I just look at what he did last year. Really surprised a lot of people with the physicality that he brought to the position. I think Jaquez Washington, as far as a quarterback for your defense goes, I mean, he over-exceeded all expectations last year. I'm expecting big things from not only him, but Darrell Givens, a guy who you guys call Pig, I believe. No, but I believe, Paul was very adamant about how good he was during spring practice. I'm confident in both of those spots. I think Darrell Givens is a guy, Austin, who, when we're talking in January, I think we look back and say he's in that third team, honorable mention, all Big 12 conversation. I think he could be that good.
I hope so, and I think Jaquez, both of these guys, from when I came in, they're both, off the field, they're both jokesters, they're both comedians, but when it comes to Saturday, those guys are straightforward, ready to play. And to see how much they've grown since when they got here, Darrell and Jaquez both, when they came in, 17, 18 years old. Well, Darrell's older. He's a I can't remember how old he's, but he's older. just to see how much they've grown, from people who didn't play at all and were scout team guys and helping us out every week on offense, to now Jacquez having, in my opinion, is one of the better safeties in the conference. Phil Steele doesn't agree. But, and like you said with Darrell, towards the end of the year, we're going to see, like last year, toward the end of the year, he really came on. He started playing more significant minutes once when we played Baylor, and from then on he was a staple in that defense. And you like to see those guys continually get better. And by the end of the year, like you said, both of them should be up there in the ranks of defensive players in this conference.
Well, Jacquez Washington, 16th in the Big 12 in tackles last year. I believe he was third on Iowa State behind the two linebackers. So the statistics are there. You look behind those guys. I like the depth at strong safety. I think Jared Brackens is a guy who he had some really solid experience on special teams last year. Tell us a little bit about Deion Broomfield at free safety, guy who his junior season haven't seen a ton of. How would he fit in? Should Iowa State need him?
Deion's going to play a little bit of nickel, I believe. Him and C.J. Morgan have been kind of sharing that duty of nickel. Deion's a guy that's played special teams ever since he's been around, and he's a very hard worker, smart kid on and off the field. He's one of those guys that's going to give you everything he has, and is, him and Jacquez are best friends. I mean, they're roommates and all that good stuff. So when you look at those two being able to, kind of vibe on and off the field, it only helps with the relationship that they have. And Deion is a kid who, is farther behind the curve with those guys athletically, but when it comes to making a play, making a tackle, he can do pretty much the same thing. So you're really confident in, having him, who's a junior, who's a guy who's been around a while.
Let's talk about nickel. C.J. Morgan, to me, just looked like a natural out there last year as a young guy. I remember the Iowa game. I thought he looked that was probably his best game of the season. Physical is what I think of with C.J. Morgan.
CJ's like you said, physical player, a little bit on the light side, trying to get his weight up as well. But the thing with CJ is that he moves so well. I mean, the kid can run for days, long legs, and kind of a strider, and he can cover ground fast. That's what you want out of a nickel back, is someone to be able to kind of bluff a blitz look and then drop it into coverage and be able to be in the right spot at the right time. And CJ brings you that with his length and athleticism. All
right, well, we're talking defensive backs today. Again, I really like Iowa State secondary in 2012. I really do. And again, I mean, it always comes back to the defensive line when you're talking Iowa State football. It has ever since I started doing this. Your secondary is only as good as your defensive line in reality, and that's why you saw the Oklahoma State game, for instance. That line, when they can go 10 deep, they went 11 deep at one point last year. It makes your life a heck of a lot easier on those linebackers and secondary. We'll talk about the defensive line here in a couple weeks. So again, a position focus. We're going to do this every week. Go position by position, breaking down the 2012 Iowa State Cyclones. So for Austen Arnaud, I'm Chris Williams here at CycloneFanatic.com.